Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and this is In Time. Just the camera there a bit. Today is June 3rd. It is the 8th or 9th, depending on how you choose to measure it, day of the riots. And I think let's do just a little bit of house cleaning before we get started. First of all, please remember to like and subscribe. We are slaves to the almighty God that is the algorithm of YouTube. So please, if you can like and subscribe, especially while you're waiting around, well, the off chance we don't start on time. There have been a lot of people who've had a lot of comments on the show, which we greatly appreciate. So just as a reminder, if you like the content, if you like what you see here, you can always reach out to me. I'm on the Discord. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. I am solely responsible for the content. If there's anything you don't like, if there's something we get wrong, if there's something you think needs to be corrected, or if you just have kind of objections in general, you can reach out to our executive producer. His name is Tony Designs. He will be in the live chat right now. We also have a link to his phone number and address. You can call any time, day or night. He is very concerned with any objections that people have to our content. Please let him know. He's there to deal with any complaints you have. Just don't hesitate, and should take care of everything. So thank you. So 3 nights ago, the 15 states had deployed the National Guard. Last night it was 25. Tonight it is 31 states and the District of Columbia who have deployed the National Guard. From one protest about 9 nights ago to 150 cities across the country tonight in nearly 20 countries worldwide. The protests continue to grow. Donald Trump has demanded that governors deploy the National Guard in, quote, sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. He said that if governors didn't act appropriately to end these protests, quote, I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. Multiple governors have said that they do not recognize his authority to deploy active military troops in their states without their approval, and they have declined to grant him that permission. Trump has threatened to make such deployments regardless, and he has told governors that they must, quote, dominate their people and dominate their states. Yesterday, we reported on a new kind of unit being deployed. We will show some images of these units. Nobody's been able to identify them. They appear to be deliberately trying to obfuscate who these people are. In some cases, we will show images of officers who have been hiding their badge numbers, making it very difficult, covering their faces, making it very difficult to identify who is who. I will cover that. But we have identified, we believe, the new units. They've identified themselves whenever asked as working for the Department of Justice. At this point, we believe that they are actually from the Bureau of Prisons. They are riot officers trained in putting down prison riots and are now being deployed as tactical units across the United States. Defense Secretary Mark Esper held a press conference today in which he pushed back against Trump's assertion that he would use the military. Quote, the option to use active duty forces in a law enforcement role should only be used as a matter of last resort and only in the most urgent and dire situation. We are not in one of those situations now. I do not support invoking the Insurrection Act. In typical fashion, shortly after these comments, the White House Press Secretary Kayla McEnany, has said, quote, as of right now, Secretary Esper is still Secretary Esper. Should the president lose faith, we will learn about that in the future. Shortly thereafter, Mark Esper did in fact reverse a prior decision he had made to send home 200 active duty troops from the 82nd Airborne, which has been deployed to the D.C. area. Meanwhile, James Mattis, a Marine general who has been in high regard by members of both parties, who resigned as defense secretary in protest over Donald Trump's Syria policy, wrote a stunning rebuke of Donald Trump today, calling him a threat to the Constitution. In this rebuke, he wrote, quote, "I have watched this week's unfolding events angry and appalled. The words, quote, equal justice under the law are carved in the pediment of the United States Supreme Court. This is precisely what the protesters are rightly demanding. It is a wholesome and unifying demand. We must reject and hold accountable those in office who would make a mockery of our Constitution. Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people. He doesn't even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us. We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years of this deliberate effort. We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years without mature leadership. We can unite without him, drawing on the strengths inherent in our civil society. The Nazi slogan for destroying us was, quote, divide and conquer. Our American answer is, in union, there is strength. We must summon that unity to surmount this crisis, confident that we are better than our politics. He continued, when you leave an administration over clear policy differences, you need to give the people who are there as much opportunity as you can to defend this country. They still have a responsibility of protecting this great big experiment of ours. There's a period in which I owed my silence. It is not eternal. He concluded by saying, when I joined the military some 50 years ago, I swore an oath to defend the Constitution. Never did I dream that troops taking that same oath would be ordered under any circumstances to violate the constitutional rights of their fellow citizens, much less to provide a bizarre photo op for an elected commander-in-chief with military leadership standing alongside. We must reject any thinking of our cities as, quote, battle space, that our uniformed military is called upon to dominate. At home, we should use our military only when requested to do so, and on very rare occasion by the state governors. Militarizing our response sets up a false conflict, between military and civilian society. It erodes the moral ground that ensures a trusted bond between men and women in uniform and the society they are sworn to protect. That was General James Mathis, who resigned as Defense Secretary over Trump's Syria policy, giving a stunning rebuke of the president today, ostensibly joining Mark Escobar, the current Defense Secretary, who has said that he strongly opposes, or let me rephrase that, to be accurate, he does not support invoking the Insurrection Act. We've spoken before about the politics of division, which is an extraordinarily good way to get elected. It works. It's beautiful. We are motivated more by anger and division and hatred than we are by compassion. It's an unfortunate fault in our evolution, it would appear. It works. And that's how Trump got elected. But we are more divided now than we have ever been since the Civil War. And Trump has used that division to help get himself elected. But the consequences have been extraordinary division inside his own government, with early on purportedly a number of his own cabinet considering invoking the 25th Amendment by which they could remove him from office. It is thought that perhaps one reason he has not filled all of his cabinet positions is to keep the half quorum level low so that there aren't enough to easily remove him if they should choose to do so. There's been little talk of the 25th any time in the last 8 months to a year, but that's division. It's division in his own party. Mitt Romney and John McCain, respected Republicans who have openly opposed him. Aside from that, there are the divisions in this country, which he is using, talking about, instead of invoking the First Amendment, possibly by accident, possibly on purpose, invoking the Second Amendment. And now we have instances of members of the alt-right and radical right who have been arrested and are now being charged with deliberately stoking the riots and trying to frame others for these riots. And we'll get into that, and we'll get into a few other interesting stories. And yes, we will cover more of COVID. We will say, though, the previously peaceful protests in Greece, France, and the UK have started to turn violent. There has been a rather extraordinary assault on the U.S. Embassy in Greece, and we will have footage of that shortly. In France, the police they've had some difficulties with their police as well, and it appears that those tensions are flaring up again, as they are in the UK. The charges against the police officers are against the police officer, the original arresting officer who had put his knee onto Floyd's neck, killing him, has been upgraded from third-degree murder to second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Further, there have now today been charges filed against the remaining three officers, Officer Thomas Lin, Jae Kung, and Tu Tao. They were all there and are now all facing at a minimum abetting second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Meanwhile, as we mentioned a few days ago, California has hit a new high in the number of new cases reported of COVID-19, a high they had not hit since May 5th. They are continuing to climb in COVID cases. A number of states are climbing in COVID cases, and nearly all states are seeing a reversal of the gains that we had seen in reducing new cases. Florida today has now also exceeded its previous record, which was set in mid-April, shortly after the lockdown. This brings the total U.S. COVID cases to 1.9 million and now 110,000 deaths. Meanwhile, Moderna Therapeutics out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, has completed phase 2 trials for their COVID vaccine and are expected to start phase 3 trials in July with about 30,000 participants. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, has said that he expects that we will have a completed vaccine by the end of the year and several 100,000 doses of it by the beginning of 2021. Governor Cooper of North Carolina has said that he will not ease social distancing restrictions for the Republican National Convention in Charlottesville in August. The Republican National Committee has said that, therefore, they will not be nominating their candidate, Donald Trump, for president in Charlottesville this year. That is a basic rundown, and what we're going to do now is, and I started the videos perhaps just a little bit late, but we are going to we have a whole bunch of unfortunately, video for everyone today. So what we are going to do is on the window to my left, the co-host window, we are going to be placing videos that have been seen of excessive uses of brutality, starting with the notable attacks on the media. What we have now is a quite clearly targeted attacking of the media, at a minimum in many cases where the media has been at least grouped in with the rioters, but in some cases, and we will show that footage, they have been quite clearly the intended targets. In one case, we've talked about this before, where there's an officer who breaks off from a pack of officers and he appears to engage the media. It appears in a few cases, maybe it was a rogue police officer. In a few cases, it appears quite deliberate. So we will be starting that on the co-host window, and in the main window, we will be starting the apologies. We will be starting the a rundown of a number of photos that have been taken, a number of photo sort of opportunities, and the our basic footage of the protests and the riots across this country. First, we're going to start, I think, locally, and then internationally, a rundown of all the videos. But what you can see here was the original, sort of the first incident where a CNN crew is broadcasting live. The police were arresting one. We don't know if she was a protester or a rioter or who she was, but the police are arresting one. They then interrogate the CNN crew. This is clearly a CNN crew with a camera. They are live on air, and they are arrested. And then we will see other footage of crews from multiple countries being assaulted, and we're going to cover some of the other extraordinary footage there. We also have, wow, a lot going on. So I think we're going to go into do a rundown. What I think I'm going to do right now is I'm going to check on the live chat and see how things are progressing and where we stand there. And then we will move on to covering some of the particulars of the press secretary's statements today, the statements by the defense secretary, and where we stand. There is some good news, which is it does appear that the violence has been actually getting somewhat lower, and not, this is, by the way, that is, I believe, the Washington National Monument. You see there, that is as of 6 hours ago, troops being deployed in preparation for tonight's protests. And actually, I do believe we may be a little late on this, but just because, I wish I was kidding. I wish I was kidding. There is a tornado warning for Philadelphia. Downtown Philadelphia is now under a tornado warning. We don't know how long that lasts, but if you are in the Philadelphia area, please be advised that there is a tornado warning because, of course, because 2020. I think that's it. I think In Time is officially calling it. It's just 2020 has just been a it's just been one of those years. All right, you know what? We're gonna cut out those Dorito chip comments. This is a really okay. I see how it is. Well, you could become a Patreon and then actually yeah, a Pentium 2. Okay, you know what? Yeah. So okay, so become a Patreon and do something about it. So I will say earlier, if you, like I said, if you like the show, please like and subscribe. And also, you can become a patron. We'll discuss the Patreon Hangout. Actually, I want to cover this. This footage that you're seeing now in the middle. Quote, this was Tim Murtaugh, the Trump communications director. We know now from the Park Police that there was no dispersal of riots, and they did, of protesters. And there, I believe he says here, there was no use of tear gas, and anybody reporting otherwise is lying. That was footage directly of that incident, which, according to the communications director, which happened immediately before the photo op, and according to the communications director, did not happen. You can see the tear gas there being deployed. You can also see the protesters were not engaged in any violence. The police moved in according to a predetermined time, not anything else. So we're also going to see footage of reporters who were actually covering it as it happened from the inside and who were also attacked. But this was to give him the photo op. This is the photo op that former Defense Secretary Mathis was talking about. The president simply wanted to get a photo op in front of, and his press secretary defended that photo op. That was an extraordinary defense of what happened here, and we will absolutely be covering that as well. And I think, no, I think we're going to go without sound for a minute, although I do want to identify there's a minor glitch in my Dorito-based system, and I'm going to try to get that. I think that's not, there we are. Oh, I know what the problem is. I think I know what the problem is. All right, we are going to try to fix the Dorito here. Yeah, okay, good. So I'm going to check out quickly the live chat, which has been hopping. I really do appreciate all of you joining us. If you have not yet liked and subscribed, that helps us with the algorithm. And so what I think I'm going to do here is we're going to put on the audio for the, like I said, on the left here, just to my left, your right, you will see this is right now the Minnesota State Police arresting a CNN crew. They have at this point arrested the producer, the anchor, and the cameraman. The camera has been left recording live as they were being arrested. We're going to listen in.
Taken into custody, our camera now on the ground, still rolling, still capturing these live images.
You're sighting us in, dude. Guys.
You're outside the White House where Donald Trump is about to speak. It's getting a bit tense.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. We've just had to run about a block as police moved in. We've been fired at with rubber bullets. My cameraman has been hit. We've also seen tear gas being used. Here we go. They're moving through again. This is exactly what it looks like. Exactly what it looks like. We're just staying safely.
Oh.
Whoa. Oh.
Amelia, can you hear us?
Amelia, are you okay? Or your cameraman? Hello, Amelia. The police just charged at Amelia and our 7 News cameraman there, and looks like a policeman just punched our cameraman.
Which is interesting because they're not discriminating between protesters and the media here. Amelia, can you hear us yet?
Amelia, are you there?
Are you okay?
Yes, I am. I am fine. You heard us yelling there that we were media, but they don't care. They're being indiscriminate at the moment. They chased us down that street, and as you see, they were firing these rubber bullets at everyone. There is tear gas, and now we are really surrounded by the police, and you really saw the way that they dealt with my cameraman, Tim. They're quite violent, and they do not care who they're targeting at the moment.
It felt like 5 cops must have been on top of me at that point, kind of, tugging on my arms and legs in different directions. Someone had a foot or a knee on my head or neck against the ground. They put my arm behind my back, which the way they were twisting my body I couldn't do. They told me to stop resisting, but I wasn't resisting. I clearly identified myself as a journalist. I had a press badge on, and by the time they finally cuffed me and stood me up, I yelled at them repeatedly to grab my phone, which had fallen onto the ground. I kept screaming that I was a journalist and that I needed my phone, and they refused. And instead, what did they say? They said, shut the up. They called me a asshole.
I'm a journalist! Oh, fuck! I'm fine. Give me a hand. They're right here. Please get my phone. I can't get it. I can't get it around. I can't get it around. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting.
And there was a massive protest that started near a train station. They marched all over the neighborhood. And then eventually in the evening, the cops started to get aggressive, and there were a ton of clashes. It kind of turned into a cycle of conflict where there'd be two lines of, the cops in riot gear, and then a line of protesters. Occasionally, some protesters would throw some projectiles, maybe a glass bottle or a stone. And usually when that happened, cops would charge and begin to kind of tackle and indiscriminately arrest and sometimes violently arrest protesters. They often deployed a lot of pepper spray. They used their batons. They sometimes dragged protesters across the concrete to bring them to the police van. And yeah, it was an incredibly chaotic and crazy scene.
You look at my press pass, I'm a journalist. You're arresting a journalist right now.
Then you should have gotten out of my way.
I didn't get out of the way, you ran past me. Can you please get my phone? It's right there. Get my phone.
Shut the up. You're not getting any phone. Get out of here. Let's go.
And then they brought me to the police van, and I went to the precinct where I was put in a cell with 15 other guys. I was there probably in that cell for an hour or so before being transferred over to another precinct where I was issued a summons for refusal to disperse and then released. I think, although as much as I think it's important to protect journalists' ability to cover these rallies, and what happened to me was definitely wrong, I think it's also important to often keep the focus on the thousands of other people that are getting arrested that aren't journalists and don't have the resources and privileges that we have.
Okay.
Okay, well, you keep going and go where you got to go, and that's fine with us.
Okay.
We got plenty of time here.
Are you okay?
I'm getting shot. I'm getting
Katie, are you okay?
rubber bullets. It's okay. It's those pepper bullets.
Are they?
Bullets.
Who are they aiming that at?
Nice shooting at the photographer.
At us, like directly at us. Directly.
Why
at
are they
us.
doing that?
He's shooting at our crew.
All right. What you have here now, we are seeing first in the window on the right here, we are seeing a MSNBC crew that was attacked. But right below, we are seeing the assault today on Athens, Greece. That is the U.S. Embassy about 7 hours ago. You can see that's really quite a staggering. Those are a number of Molotov cocktails. We're going to see a few more images of Paris, France, and we will show that footage by itself. Just the attack on, yes, In Time is the first Dorito-powered news organization. We're very proud of that. So we're gonna show a lot of these. This, what you see here on the left, we just passed several news crew that was assaulted. We discussed this earlier. The gun is leveled against the news crew with pepper bullets, and they're sprayed. They're clearly news crew. This man is handing his credentials over. He is about to be pepper sprayed in the face, despite handing over his credentials and being spoken with by an officer. This may or may not be a rogue officer who know that there's the spray, but this clearly should not have happened, and it's unlikely there will be many consequences. You will see some instances. We also have the footage. We now have the body camera footage. We discussed this last night. 2 nights ago, there were officers pulling people out of cars, breaking the car windows, and these were cars that were passing through. Nobody here was doing anything, and at least 4 officers in that incident were fired. But what we have, we do now have the body cam footage from that. It's really rather shocking. They're pulling people out of the cars in some cases while the cars are moving. There's a lot of panic. There's a lot of fear. And we spoke about this when we had Landon Knoll on, that does happen. And this isn't easy on anyone. It's not easy on the officers. Some mistakes are going to be made. We had spoken about this repeatedly, and we had failed to get the footage until now. This is an MSNBC reporter. He is being descended upon by riot police. It is clear who he is, and they're deploying multiple canisters of gas. You're going to see another 2 come in. 1 missed. The other one just right by there. These are reporters. They have been identified as reporters. They have... in fact, if I recall, this crew also had been told explicitly to stay there, and they had to retreat under significant gas canisters, and they are now retreating into the crowd. Down below, you will see an example of London, where now reporters there appear to have been attacked. We have also mentioned that there were officers who nobody could identify. This is one such officer. He is in a entire unit, none of whom have any identifying markings. You can't tell what division they are. You can't tell who they work for, and you cannot tell their names or there's no way to identify them. In this particular case here, what you will see is all of the identifying marks have been removed. This is in the right above our calendar. You will see there's tape over the badge number, and between the mask and the tape over the badge number, there is no way to identify who this officer is. If he should do anything wrong, you're SOL. There's nothing you can do about it. So what I would like to do now is, well, let's finish the London protests down there in the middle. While we are, let's see, we did the Huffington Post. All right. This is this is remarkable. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was actually the governor of California, a very successful governor of California, very well liked, has come out and spoken. And let's see what Governor Schwarzenegger had to say.
Two sides to bigotry, and there are not two sides to hatred. And if you choose to march with a flag that symbolizes the slaughter of millions of people, there are not two sides to that. The only way to be...
All right, the audio is low on that. What I'm going to do is try here to boost the audio, and let's see if we can make that a little easier to hear. All right, we're going to try that again, and let's see if this works any better. Oh, good, I appear to have muted it, exactly as I intended. So this is former governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He is speaking about Donald Trump, and we will try to get the audio for you on that. We're going to try. In addition to attempting to get that audio, I think we are going to try not to speed him up at 50% rate. I think that would be, while amusing, may not be productive.
The only way to beat the loud and angry voices of hate is to meet them with louder and more reasonable voices. And that includes you, President Trump.
All right. The sound is, I think, reasonably well repaired. I apologize. It is quiet. This is former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, beloved by many in California, believe it or not, as a Chipmunk Schwarzenegger. I am really tempted to. I was like, "Oops, sorry, we accidentally had." That may happen by the end of the show. We'll see. All right. Former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Republican, once thought to be a presidential candidate if he could get around the fact that the Constitution wouldn't let him run. But Governor Schwarzenegger.
Two sides to bigotry, and there are not two sides to hatred. And if you choose to march with a flag that symbolizes the slaughter of millions of people, there are not two sides to that. The only way to beat the loud and angry voices of hate is to meet them with louder and more reasonable voices. And that includes you, President Trump. In fact, as president of this great country, you have a moral responsibility to send an unequivocal message that you won't stand for hate and racism. Now let me help you write your speech here a little bit. As President of the United States and as a Republican, I reject the support of white supremacists. The country that defeated Hitler's armies is no place for Nazi flags. The party of Lincoln won't stand with those who carry the battle flag of the failed Confederacy. Was that difficult? You see, I told you. I have a message to the neo-Nazis and to the white nationalists and to the neo-Confederates. Let me be just as blunt as possible. You heroes are losers. You're supporting a lost cause. And believe me, I know the original Nazis. I was born in Austria in 1947, shortly after the Second World War. And growing up, I was surrounded by broken men. Men who came home from the war filled with shrapnels and guilt. Men who were misled into a losing ideology. And I can tell you that this ghost that you idolize spent the rest of their lives living in shame. And right now, they're resting in hell. I know that you weren't born with these hateful views. No one is. But the truth is, it's never too late to make the choices, to learn and to evolve, and to understand that all human beings have equal value. If you say, Arnold, hey, I was just at the march, don't call me a Nazi, I have nothing to do with Nazis at all. Let me help you. Don't hang around people who carry Nazi flags, give Nazi salutes, or shout Nazi slogans. Go home. Or better yet, tell them that they're wrong to celebrate an ideology that murdered millions of people. And then go home.
All right, that was Governor Schwarzenegger on a brief clip that I hoped you would all appreciate. I will say he was speaking about the heroes of the Confederacy, and we are seeing something rather remarkable. There are statues of Robert E. Lee and various other, and this was mentioned earlier, Frank Rizzo, his statue has just come down. We have some photos that have been coming up through on these slides here of a number of statues that have been coming down. There's been a removal of Confederate monuments and memorials across the South at this point. I unfortunately don't have any specific numbers, but I do know. So Birmingham, Alabama, the mayor of Birmingham, Randolph Woodfin, arrived as demonstrators were attempting to destroy a 115-year-old monument, a Confederate monument. He said that he was there to, quote, finish the job. He asked them to go home, and then they proceeded to tear down that monument. In Montgomery, Alabama, they have taken down monuments of Robert E. Lee and several monuments of Robert E. Lee, and one on the grounds of the Lee High School has also been taken down. Nashville, Tennessee has taken away a controversial statue of Edward Cernak, a former U.S. senator and newspaper owner who would attack civil rights. In Virginia, they have taken down several memorials, including one that was just a memorial to the Confederacy. There are other ones down in, okay, that's the end of that list I've got there. I've got another list. We'll get it. So it's been years in people trying to get rid of these monuments. It's been, obviously there's been interest in doing it for the last 100 years or so, but most keenly, I recall in the last 20 years, there's been a considerable push to say, look, we recognize that there is a history to the South, and I think history is important, and I think it's important for people to identify their history, but not all history is equally good. It's all history, but some of it is stuff not that you should be proud of, but that you should remember so that you don't repeat it. all countries have this history. The United States has history like that. Germany has history like that. France has history like that. Our treatment of the Mexicans and the Native Americans in particular, but our treatment of our own citizens during the Civil War is a spectacular example. And the values of the Confederate South, were there some good ones? Of course. There's no ideology that's all bad. If there were, life would be a lot easier. If life would be black and white, it's not that way. There were ideologies and there were values that people could look up to, and even the worst people had positive traits. But you have to remember that when you hold them up, you hold up their ideals as well, whether you intend to or not. And it is an interesting and I think very positive side effect that we are now seeing a number of statues coming down across the entire South. So with that said, I would like to show some footage from the U.S. Embassy in Athens. This is a short piece. It will be coming up in the middle window. It will be brief. We'll play it a couple of times just so you have an idea of Molotov cocktails being deployed against police officers in defense of the U.S. Embassy in Greece earlier today. That was the United States Embassy out in Athens, Greece earlier today. We have, as we've reported before now, unfortunately, a number of protests in the UK and in France that have become violent, obviously in Greece as well. So they are unfortunately adopting that. Still, we have in over a dozen countries across the world a number of people who have joined in sympathy with the United States and with our citizens in particular in protest for the equal rights of all of our citizens. We now have, we've been showing before a number, footage from people who have lost either an eye or been very badly injured in one way or another as a result of rubber bullets. We have pictures of what the rubber bullets look like, so I will try to get one of those on the screen, but someone just dropped. We have a Discord, and anyone who wants to come to our Discord, we have a breaking news section if you want to see what we're talking about here and what's going on around the world. People keep that section very up to date, and we often draw from that section when we're trying to look at what's going on, especially in social media. One thing that In Time tries to do is we do want to bring the nationwide stories and the stories that you can see everywhere else in the media, but we also want to bring the social aspect of it and what's being seen on social media that you can't necessarily see in other places. So we're going to try and get for you now. We've just gotten one report, appears to be credible, of a student who received a rubber bullet to the head and is purported now to have skull fractures and or brain damage. We'll look at that. We have multiple reporters who have been hit in the eye. Some accusations that was deliberate, that officers have been targeting the head and or the eye because of the damage it does. There was a 12-year-old boy who was struck in the head and bleeding badly and unknown injuries several nights ago, and had to be carried away bleeding profusely because the rubber bullets obviously don't do the same kind of damage that officers may be used to and maybe are in fact seeking in some cases. They do target the head, and if it hits anywhere near the eye, it can blind people. But we'll get to that in a minute. I've been unable to find the rubber bullets, so we'll get to those in a second. I do want to get back to the concept of symbols. We don't think of ourselves as animals very often, but we are. Apes are animals, and they're one of our closer cousins, and apes follow symbols. And if there is an alpha in the pack of apes, they will follow that alpha, but only so long as they can be immediately reminded of that alpha. Usually they have to see the alpha. The alpha has to be somewhere in the general vicinity. And in some cases there can be a stand-in, but it has to be a pretty strong stand-in. It has to be something that the alpha represents the alpha. And the alpha himself, with apes, if I recall, there's a limit of about 12. You can't have many more than 12 apes. That's about the limit that can be in proximity to the alpha, and they can all sort of see and be aware of the presence of the alpha. Human beings are very similar. We use flags to represent a country, to represent an ideal, and it helps us to remember those ideals. But it can be used positively and negatively as well. The ideals of the Confederacy were, in many cases, profoundly negative ideals. Now, there was some positives in there, but and I understand there's what's called the backfire effect, and where people kind of entrench. The more they realize that they may have made a mistake or backed the wrong horse, they entrench, and the reason they entrench is because of the humiliation in admitting that you maybe followed the wrong. There are the bullets. Bullets on the left hand right now, just to my left on the right hand side. Those are rubber bullets, 3 kinds of rubber bullets that we showed right there. All extraordinarily large, and I have to believe lethal if they strike correctly. At any rate, but there are all sorts of symbols. The Bible is a symbol. Many Christians say that they want it to be more than a symbol. They think you should read it. They think you should understand it. Any Christian who thinks that Donald Trump is a Christian is deluding themselves. He can't quote any passages from the Bible. He evades when asked point blank what are his favorites. He misquotes them. He gives the titles wrong. He doesn't know the Bible. He doesn't care. He's a businessman. That's all he really cares about. Yesterday, he did a photo op in front of a church. It was a church right opposite the White House. We covered the photo op. We covered the fallout of it. Now, this first of all, the Arnold Schwarzenegger just spoke. We had him on, and he was talking about backing the wrong guy, backing the what he called the losers. The people who had the bad ideologies, who you could still get attracted to, but we did anyway. That's a large number of the Confederacy and the people to whom we have, and again, there were good people there. But Donald Trump likes to use the Bible, likes to use churches, because he's aware that this is a heavily Christian nation, and that you can reach a lot of people by using the dog whistle of a church and or the Bible. So holding this Bible, not reading any passages, not even holding it in any meaningful sense. He was holding it, he wasn't holding it as a man who reads that book or who cares for it or treasures it. I've seen ministers hold a Bible. I've seen Christians hold a Bible. He was holding it at his side in his palm. This officer is spitting on someone. This is multiple officers on the right window here, spitting on a suspect that they've detained. So I don't think actually we have right now, we showed it yesterday, we don't have the footage of that, but what we do have, this has been condemned by, I think, what he did was, shortly after he said that he was going to deploy the U.S. military to end all of these protests, he walked to St. Paul's, St. Vincent's, I got to find out the name. So perhaps somebody can figure out the name of the church that's opposite the White House. That was the church that was burned. It wasn't destroyed, but it was burned badly. Now, in the process, he knew he was going to he knew he was going to go there. It was going to be for a photo op. It was staged. They set up police to clear the area. That area had a number of protesters. The protesters, most of them were not even protesting. They were seeking shelter. They were tired. The bishop of that church was handing out food and water and trying to help them. She would later condemn Trump's actions on NPR. Nonetheless, Donald Trump decided that he wanted to do a photo op in front of that church for the symbolism. He ordered it cleared. It was. We have now had members of his administration trying to defend the clearing of that church, while we've had most other organizations and people saying that this was an absolutely atrocious act. This is the White House press secretary giving her defense of why the area outside the church was cleared.
Why did the president feel it was important to go walk over there through the park into the church?
It was extremely important. Look, the president wanted to send a very powerful message that we will not be overcome by looting, by rioting, by burning. This is not what defines America. And going and standing by St. John's Church was a very important moment. And I would note that through all of time, we've seen presidents and leaders across the world who have had leadership moments and very powerful symbols that were important for a nation to see at any given time to show a message of resilience and determination. Like Churchill, we saw him inspecting the bombing damage. It sent a powerful message of leadership to the British people. And George W. Bush throwing out the ceremonial first pitch after 9/11, and Jimmy Carter putting on a sweater to encourage energy savings, and George H.W. Bush signing the Americans with Disabilities Act, flanked by 2 disabled Americans. And for this president, it was powerful and important to send a message that the rioters, the looters, the anarchists, they will not prevail, that burning churches are not what America's about. And that moment, holding the Bible up, is something that has been widely hailed by Franklin Graham and others, and it was a very important symbol for the American people to see that we will get through this through unity and through faith.
All right, we will show that once again in a minute. There was low audio there for the first half of that, so we'll show that again. She gives a number of examples, and she talks about the importance of symbolism. She is absolutely correct. It troubles me when people sit there and say, well, I don't think we should be about symbolism. We're about symbolism. We're closer to apes, and the symbols matter. The symbols absolutely matter. The flag matters. I am okay with burning it because I think that the freedom to express your opinion, including by burning it, is far more important than the symbol itself. It's actually there's an old Buddhist saying, if you encounter Buddha on the street, what should you do? The answer is you should kill him. And what they mean by that rather shocking phrase is that the Buddha is a symbol. Now, there's no real Buddha, there's just a symbol. And you need to kill the symbols and remember what they represent, not the symbols themselves. I believe in symbols, and I believe in photo ops. One of my favorite presidents was Barack Obama, and I was fortunate to be able to participate in and around photo ops for him, and I was very pleased to do so. So it's, photo ops are important. But in all the photo ops that she mentioned, she ignores a number of interesting facts. She talks about Winston Churchill and his photo op surveying the bomb damage. They didn't go with riot police and clear people out before he did that. When Jimmy Carter put on his sweater to remind people that they needed to conserve energy, they didn't go to Mass Gas and Electric or to California P&G and start tear gassing the people who work at energy companies before he put the does anybody understand the difference? When George W. Bush threw out the first pitch after 9/11, that was extraordinarily symbolic, and it was important, and I was not as moved as I could have been because he certainly was not one of my favorite presidents, but I understood why he had to do it, and I thought it was important. When the mayor of New York appeared on the first episode of Saturday Night Live after 9/11, it was important. It had to be done. if Donald Trump wants to do a photo op in front of a church, and if he really wants to clear everybody there, not wait until it's convenient for them, do it when it's on his time and act like a dictator and literally just wholesale clear people out of the way with tear gas and smoke grenades. Okay, fine. But then why doesn't he at least pretend to be a leader when he's standing in front of it and talk about unity? He'd be a fucking hypocrite, but at least he'd be doing something positive. All he did was stand there holding the Bible as if he couldn't wait to get rid of it, posed for a few photo ops and left. There were injured people that were out. There is, and we have, you'll see coming up, there was an Australian team, there was an Australian news organization that got attacked. Now, they clarified later and said that, okay, maybe some gas was deployed and used, but it was against all protesters. Sorry, not protesters, rioters. And again, please remember there is a difference. So let's see these events according to the Donald Trump's the 2020 campaign communications chairman, who has reminded us all that the truth has pants, and that apparently the truth has a hard time putting its pants on. Don't ask. I don't have the time to explain it. We will see, and this is a camera crew coming under fire. That camera crew, by the way, also had license to be there, and in Washington, they have declared that camera crews, I think it's Washington, it may have been Pennsylvania, I apologize, has declared that camera crews can violate curfew. All news personnel can violate curfew. They were out past curfew and they got shot at. At any rate, this is the Australian news team that did not witness anything not happening nowhere around a place that was most certainly not Washington, D.C., near or far away from a church that may or may not have existed.
You're outside the White House where Donald Trump is about to speak. It's getting a bit tense.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. We've just had to run about a block as police moved in. We've been fired at with rubber bullets. My cameraman has been hit. We've also seen tear gas being used. Here we go. They're moving through again. This is exactly what it looks like. Exactly what it looks like. We're just staying safely.
Oh.
Whoa. Oh.
Amelia, can you hear us?
Amelia, are you okay? Or your cameraman? Hello, Amelia. The police just charged at Amelia and our 7 News cameraman there, and looks like a policeman just punched our cameraman.
Which is interesting because they're not discriminating between protesters and the media here. Amelia, can you hear us yet?
Amelia, are you there?
Are you okay?
Yes, I am. I am fine. You heard us yelling there that we were media, but they don't care. They are being indiscriminate at the moment. They chased us down that street, and as you see, they were firing these rubber bullets at everyone. There is tear gas, and now we are really surrounded by the police, and you really saw the way that they dealt with my cameraman, Tim. They're quite violent, and they do not care who they're targeting at the moment.
All right, that was an Australian team of journalists who were there. Again, the protesters and the bishop who was there have claimed that the protesting was not violent. Many of the protesters were resting and recovering. And you can see that in a coordinated fashion, all of the police simply attacked. Now, this was, if I recall, not during curfew. The reason they did this was because they knew that Trump would be speaking there shortly. He wanted the symbolism of speaking in front of the burnt-out church, and he wanted the space. So they had to make clear so that he could throw out the ceremonial first pitch. Now, Mr. Websby said, is the truth trying to get into our pants? No, I'm sorry. The correct analogy is Mr. Trump likes to grab women by the truth. So we're going to play that one more time because I think that is worth it. Yes, someone does need to explain to her that the goggles do work best when they are over your eyes. We'll let it go. You can see that is Los Angeles, California, earlier today. Police officers just began striking the crowd. To the best of my understanding, I was not there, but to the best of my understanding and the reports, once again, they began attacking. There was no violence starting. We don't know that for certain, but we will. All right, once again, this is the Australian news team. And remember, please, according to Donald Trump, this did not happen. It certainly didn't happen the way you see it happening or the way you hear it happening. And it didn't happen where you see it or hear it happening. And fake news. Thank you.
You're outside the White House where Donald Trump is about to speak. It's getting a bit tense.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. We've just had to run about a block as police moved in. We've been fired at with rubber bullets. My cameraman has been hit. We've also seen tear gas being used. Here we go. They're moving through again. This is exactly what it looks like. Exactly what it looks like. We're just staying safely.
Oh.
Whoa. Oh.
Amelia, can you hear us?
Amelia, are you okay? Or your cameraman? Hello, Amelia. The police just charged at Amelia and our 7 News cameraman there, and looks like a policeman just punched our cameraman.
Which is interesting because they're not discriminating between protesters and the media here. Amelia, can you hear us yet?
Amelia, are you there?
You heard
Are you
us
okay?
yelling then. Yes, I am. I am fine. You heard us yelling there that we were media, but they don't care. They're being indiscriminate at the moment. They chased us down that street, and as you see, they were firing these rubber bullets at everyone. There is tear gas, and now we are really surrounded by the police, and you really saw the way that they dealt with my cameraman, Tim. They're quite violent, and they do not care who they're targeting at the moment.
All right, that was the incident that, again, as has been explained to us, did not occur. Once again, let us hear the White House explanation of how and why it was so important that Donald Trump speak at that church.
Why did the president feel it was important to go walk over there through the park into the church?
It was extremely important. Look, the president wanted to send a very powerful message that we will not be overcome by looting, by rioting, by burning. This is not what defines America. And going and standing by St. John's Church was a very important moment. And I would note that through all of time, we've seen presidents and leaders across the world who have had leadership moments and very powerful symbols that were important for a nation to see at any given time to show a message of resilience and determination. Like Churchill, we saw him inspecting the bombing damage. It sent a powerful message of leadership to the British people. And George W. Bush throwing out the ceremonial first pitch after 9/11. And Jimmy Carter putting on a sweater to encourage energy savings. And George H.W. Bush signing the Americans with Disabilities Act, flanked by 2 disabled Americans. And for this president, it was powerful and important to send a message that the rioters, the looters, the anarchists, they will not prevail, that burning churches are not what America's about. And that moment, holding the Bible up, is something that has been widely hailed by Franklin Graham and others. And it was a very important symbol for the American people to see that we will get through this through unity and through faith.
All right, that was the press secretary for the White House saying why it was so important. I've already covered this. I don't think there's any point going over it again. All of the examples she gave were very important, and it was important to help unify people. But they were accompanied by leadership. It wasn't just a photo op. It wasn't just the pictures and then I'm running away. When Churchill inspected the bombing damage, you know, that there was leadership on and around that incident, and he spoke about what he was seeing, and he told people what he saw, and he was trying to inspire people. I've never seen Trump try to inspire anyone, truth be told. But at any rate, certainly they didn't gas or throw rubber bullets before the first pitch or before signing the Americans with Disabilities Act. the people there were invited. The people who were at that church, who were being cared for by the bishop of that church, were all repelled, including the bishop of that church, who was tear gassed in attempting to help people in what she considers to be her duty as a person of the church. So, yeah. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to take a break for a minute. My Dorito is overheating, and so I'm gonna take a break. But we are going to show you the there was a HuffPo team that also had some difficulties. We're going to play that footage and that audio so that you can see their story. And then this is from the Huffington Post, and I will be back. It's a multi-core Dorito. It's a multi-core Dorito. Stop it. Wow. Why do I have such trolls in my live chat tonight? I don't know what on earth is going on, but it's multi-core Dorito. Seriously. All right. Here is the Huffington Post.
It felt like 5 cops must have been on top of me at that point. Kind of, tugging on my arms and legs in different directions. Someone had a foot or a knee on my head or neck against the ground. They put my arm behind my back, which the way they were twisting my body I couldn't do. They told me to stop resisting, but I wasn't resisting. I clearly identified myself as a journalist. I had a press badge on, and by the time they finally cuffed me and stood me up, I yelled at them repeatedly to grab my phone, which had fallen onto the ground. I kept screaming that I was a journalist and that I needed my phone. And they refused, and instead, what did they say? They said, shut the up. They called me a asshole.
I'm a journalist! Oh, fuck! I'm fine. Give me a hand. They're right here. Please get my phone. I can't get it. I can't get it around. I can't get it around. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting, guys.
And there was a massive protest that started near a train station. They marched all over the neighborhood. And then eventually, in the evening, the cops started to get aggressive, and there were a ton of clashes. It kind of turned into a cycle of conflict where there'd be 2 lines of, the cops in riot gear, and then a line of protesters. Occasionally, some protesters would throw some projectiles, maybe a glass bottle or a stone, and usually when that happened, cops would charge and begin to kind of tackle and indiscriminately arrest and sometimes violently arrest protesters. They often deployed a lot of pepper spray. They used their batons. They sometimes dragged protesters across the concrete to bring them to the police van. And yeah, it was an incredibly chaotic and crazy scene.
You look at my press pass, I'm a journalist. You're arresting a journalist right now.
Then you should have gotten out of my way.
I didn't get out of the way, you ran past me. Can you please get my phone? It's right there. Get my phone. Shut the up. You're not getting any phone. Get him out of here, let's go.
And then they brought me to the police van, and I went to the precinct where I was put in a cell with 15 other guys. I was there probably in that cell for an hour or so before being transferred over to another precinct where I was issued a summons for refusal to disperse and then released. I think although as much as I think it's important to protect journalists' ability to cover these rallies. And what happened to me was definitely wrong. I think it's also important to often keep the focus on the thousands of other people that are getting arrested that aren't journalists and don't have the resources and privileges that we have.
All right, that was HuffPo journalist on his arrest. I will say this, as we've noted, so far, actually, despite all of the rhetoric and all of the gearing up for an increase of violence, tonight it seems, it's only 11:30, and I think we'll probably be ending the stream reasonably soon. The good news is we've had, we're not going to cover every incident that happens in every protest in this country. That would be quite a lot, and people are going to get overload. Our goal is to sort of cover the overarching themes and what's going on, and to bring footage that maybe you're not going to see in other places. I think we've accomplished that. This footage, by the way, that just showed up here was a drive-by macing. The police officer, we had spoken about that one. They just, in a procession of police cars, and one of the ones towards the end rolled down the window, held out a mace canister, and just maced everybody there. So I think the other thing that I did want to mention is that in addition to having a number of the Confederate statues being removed now, especially in southern states, there are 3 members of the gang called Boogaloo or Boogaloo Boys, who are a loose-knit, usually they're considered to be right-wing extremists. 3 have been taken into custody. Oh, I apologize. No, I think I misread that wrong. But yeah, I think there have been 3 that have been arrested. They've been showing up at these protests, and it does look like, and I don't want to, things are very confusing. Things are very confusing. I think it's going to take out months to sort out who's who in most of these protests and what's going on. And I do understand, well, I'll get to that in a second. So it's very confusing. A lot of these protests, you have people who are interested in nothing more than protesting and having their voice heard, and civil disobedience. So they are deliberately protesting in violation of curfews to make a point. But there's a difference between civil disobedience and damaging property. There's a difference between resisting and going out and hurting people, attacking people. Most of the protesters at this point appear to have no interest in causing anybody any injury. There are probably some that do. There are some that are upset and some that think that the best way to get attention is to do it violently. Further, there are other groups that aren't interested in Black Lives Matter or in the specifics of what started these protests. They are either anti-government or for government, and in both cases, they appear at this point to be marching alongside the protesters, either to assist the police if something goes wrong from inside, and or to help the agent provocateurs, people who are trying to get the protesters in trouble from going from the inside, and or who are interested in genuinely in looting for the sake of. And we've seen, we see looters coming out of Target with big screen televisions, and these people are not protesters. They, in most cases, I think they're aware they're not protesters. In some cases, maybe they call themselves protesters, but that's got nothing to do with protest. That's theft. That's theft under the auspices of, gee, I'm trying to fix. I'm trying to make the world a better place. It's theft. We all know that. We all recognize that. But it makes it easy to paint the protesters all with that brush. In the end, we have no idea at this point. Most of the protests have been peaceful. Internationally, they're starting to have issues. We do have a number of issues that we've had here. The police response has not been, and there's one more footage that we didn't get up in time, but that I was interested in. I think it was from Finland, officers from Finland who detained 3 people on a New York subway until the police could show up. And it was an amazing thing to see. While they had detained these men, they were caring for them. They were making sure that they were okay. They had one pinned, but they asked him if he was injured. They asked him if he needed any help or if he needed anything, and they were obviously de-escalating the situation. We've had conversations about how policing works in other countries, but in the Scandinavian countries appears to be sort of the model for it. I don't see any reason why we can't do it here unless the thinking is genuinely that the U.S. is the best country in the world, except for our criminal element and our citizens, which can't be monitored or policed without having the most brutal police force that you can have. I don't know how that argument works. This footage that you're about to see here on the right is disturbing. All 4 officers involved in this have been fired. These are cars that were not involved, ostensibly not involved in the protests, and the officers start going through. They start breaking windows and they start violently pulling people out of cars, including at one point they're pulling a passenger out of a car. The driver can't figure out whether he wants to try to stop, in which case the police officer will successfully pull her out, or go, but she's already halfway out of the car, so she's starting to get pulled under the car, and she can't get out because the car is moving, but she can't. So you are about to see. In fact, we'll turn the audio up, and then I've got a super chat, and then I think we may leave it there. Let's see if I can get the audio in on this. Sorry, that was the wrong audio. That one didn't sound particularly good either. That was the audio for the lower window. So what I'm going to try to do now is get the audio for the upper window.
Put it down, man. Put it down. Put it down. Move it back. Let's go. What are y'all doing? I have a black man all day walking through the vibe of the shoe cover. Super all day. This is crazy, bro. I don't know what happened. Any advice on this shoe cover? I asked you to show your hands and stop the car. 2951 to be advised, Scott Bell, John Courtney, walking towards DOP, fire alcohol, over together, fire. I'm talking to somebody in the street. What the hell are y'all doing? John from the DOP. Fireworks. They're gonna try them with obstruction.
City 196, Lee, officer T. Turner.
Y'all got my head? Yeah, curfew violation. Okay. Resisting arrest.
This is Los Angeles you're seeing now.
You're not doing anything, you fucking bitch! What the fuck? Stop it! Fuck you, you fucking pig!
All right. So I think it's about time to start wrapping up. Jake, Fourth Dimensional Jake, amnesty for all arrested for protesting or curfew. That's actually a pretty good idea. That's not a bad idea. I hadn't thought of that. I do want to advise some caution. These are very difficult to watch, and we appreciate those of you who have contributed, those of you who have helped here, those of you who have super chatted and are patrons. Thank you very much. We try to do the best show we can, and part of that it involves showing you as much as we can. As much as we can, as honestly as possible. It is very easy to get worked up and to get very upset with the police. Most of my encounters with the police have all been fine and fair, and I think and hope most of us can say that. A lot of police officers join the police force because they want to serve the community in which they are in. Many officers have been taking a knee with protesters, and in some cases, and we showed this last night, we had a lot of clips of this last night. Tonight, we just seem to be going a bit the other way, but we showed a lot of officers who were walking with the protesters, and they're human beings, and in some of the cases that we've seen, it appears to me like somebody got scared, did something stupid, and in some of the cases it genuinely appears deliberate. So it's going to take a very long time to sort out what's been happening with who, what, where, when, and how. I've heard policing once described as months and months of sheer boredom followed by few seconds of sheer terror. Sounds about right, and it's not an easy job. I think they need more training. I think they need to get paid more. I think they need more respect, and they need to do more to earn it too. And part of having an open and honest society and part of fixing these problems is accurately showing them when they happen. And there have been protesters who've been looting. There's been, it's complicated. A lot is going on. So I urge people to try to take it all in as a whole and not pigeonhole the protesters based on what some are doing, not pigeonhole all police based on what some are doing, and try to get a very good picture of what's going on. The picture thus far isn't as good as we'd like. There are systemic problems with the police in this country. There are clearly quite significant problems with how the president is choosing to handle these and his grasp on the reality of what's going on and how best to deal with it. I think he cares more about how he will be remembered and more about showing people and demonstrating that he's strong than actually getting things done. But nonetheless, all of these problems aside, I think barring any I always say that we do breaking news shows and then have breaking news in the middle of the breaking news. That's us. Fortunately, we haven't had one of those in a little while. I'm hoping to avoid it. Thank you all of you who've been so supportive of this show. I'll be in the Discord for a little while in the live chat afterwards. Probably not too long. I'm going to try to get to bed reasonably early tonight and prep for tomorrow on the assumption we're going to have more news then. But from all of us here on In Time, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe. Helps us out with the algorithm. We really appreciate it when you folks can do that. And if you want to become a patron, the link is in the description. That's another way to help us out. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you in the Discord in a few minutes. Thank you all.